Hi folks, this is part 2 on my ramblings about the camera, and we've just talked a little bit about shutter speed and f-stop. I mentioned that there was a third point on what we call the exposure triangle, and Adorama has a great video about this, which I'll put a link to so that you can see it. But on the back of your camera or on the top of your camera someplace, you're going to see ISO, okay? And I want you to get your camera manual out, I want you to check it, and I want you to click on ISO. You'll notice that there are many different numbers there. Generally speaking, the slower the ISO, the lower the number, the finer detail in your pictures. When you try and go up to 3200 or 6400, you can expect to get noise in your picture, and then you have to work in post-processing to try and get the noise out, and that doesn't always work very well. So if at all possible, if you're in very low light conditions, instead of putting the ISO up to a higher number, which will make the camera more sensitive, and you'll get a shot, but it won't be very clear. It won't be as clear. So if you can, if you're shooting at night, then you opt for a tripod and a long exposure. So you may be shooting at 5 seconds or 10 seconds, but you're not going to be at a very high ISO number. So once you get the ISO up, you're going to see that one of the options is auto ISO. And I tell you what, use that in an emergency, but as we're learning, I want you to kind of lock the ISO down. If you're shooting pictures outdoors in sunshine, I would say have your ISO at about 200. If you're going to be indoors, you'll probably need to have it at 800 or maybe even 1600 to get pictures without using a flash. So I would recommend that you take your ISO off of auto. You don't want to let it float. That's what they call letting your ISO float, because as we go along, you're going to start to learn how to operate the camera on manual. Not that everybody wants to do that, but that's part of kind of conquering the camera, and it doesn't mean you have to operate the camera on manual in the future. Just know that you can. Then you'll have a set button that you need to push in order to lock that into place. Okay, so if we're trying to avoid those two bad words, overexposure and underexposure, then we want the camera's light meter to help us out to try and get what's called a full-scale negative. Full-scale negative, or in the case of what we're doing with digital photography, think about a gray scale, and think about the fact that it's going to be pure white on one side and it's going to be pure black on the other side. And then as it goes across, it's going to start to get darker, and here you'll have what's called middle gray, and then it'll go into dark gray, and then finally over here it's going to go into total darkness. So this is what's called the dynamic range of your capture. This is 0% light, and this is 100% light. What we're trying to do in our captures is we're trying to get a representative of all those different ones. So a good negative or a good file is going to have some white, it's going to have some light gray, it's going to have some medium gray, it's going to have some dark gray, and it's going to have some black. So the digital camera has something called a histogram, and I will put a link in the canvas to help you understand a histogram. But you will be able to read on the back of your digital camera whether you are capturing a full scale. Occasionally, what you'll see is that in the histogram, it will indicate that everything is over here in the white, or everything is over here in the black, and that's overexposure and underexposure. End of part 2.